Today I wanted to talk about fear. Fear. The fear of fear itself. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Was it LBJ that said that? No. Sorry, not LBJ. FDR, I wanted to say. Sorry. Don't get those two confused. Anyway, I'm not a big historian, so I'll just go with the fact that it was a great statement to say the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, because the truth is fear never benefits us in the modern day the way it may have when we were ancient man. You probably heard it before, if you thought you saw a tiger in the bush and you ran and hid, if it wasn't a tiger, that's fine, but if it was a tiger and you ignored it, then you'd get eaten. And it was a very simple concept of survival. Fear helped us survive. Something would catch your eye, or a certain movement, or you'd hear a sound, and that fear would allow you to run and hide, give you the extra adrenaline to get to where you need to be and be safe, or fight off whatever foe you may have encountered. But in the modern day, we don't have the same fears, in the Western world at least, that we once did. In most places, you don't have to worry about constantly being attacked by wild animals. But humans are another story. However, I wanted to talk about what we fear, because I feel like analyzing it, picking it apart, is crucial. Now, before I made this video, I had to make a brief one about Ukraine and what's going on over there, and it's just horrible, the bullshit that the people have to go through over there, because some other leadership wants to invade for their own posturing. And the fear that there must be in people who one day are living normally and the next day are having bombs falling next to their home is something that many of us can't imagine. But on the other side of that, there are some people that live in war-torn regions that have faced so much bombing that it's not that they don't fear it, it's just that they've let the fear go. They acknowledge that that's just part of their life. Say, well, more machine gun fire. Or even here in the US, people who live in really bad parts of town. Oh, there were more gunshots last night down the street. In some places that would be completely unacceptable and scare the hell out of people. But people become accustomed to it. But the true fears, if you want to break them down, and this is the way I see it, and I'm open to all discussions about this, but by analyzing this, we get over it. And the first and foremost, which I want to throw in this big category, is the fear of harm or loss of life, death, suffering, or sickness. So often people say, I don't fear death, I just fear suffering when I die. That makes sense. But all of us ultimately fear non-existence to some extent. It's about overcoming that. It's something that I've come to terms with, the fact that one day I will cease to exist on this plane, and that's fine. I can't change that. Overcoming those fears, I think, are the easiest ones, because they are the ones that allow us to analyze it, and then when that thought comes up, you've already dealt with it. So I would truly say, acknowledging that we can get accustomed to just about anything. This is why I don't believe in hell. People say, well, what if you burned for eternity in hellfire? I said, well, I probably wouldn't even notice, because after about a week I'd be looking at my watch going, man, is this over yet? Because pain isn't something that continues. It's something that eventually gets to a point where you just become accustomed to it. I've had the most extreme sciatic pain, and it just becomes part of who you are. So, all that aside, we fear pain and suffering and death. We fear being crippled or being ill. But we also fear loss. Not just loss for ourselves, but loss of others. And this is one that I can relate to. My father died when I was about 15, so for a while I was kind of reluctant to make friends. I guess I've always been a little bit kind of standoffish with new people, maybe people I meet, or people, I'm very kind, I'm outgoing, I'm, straight up with people. I'm careful to make friends with people that I don't feel will let me down, if you know what I mean. And you can't pick your family, you can't really even pick your friends sometimes. You can't pick your situation, you can't pick where you were born, you can't pick the circumstances of your own life, and all those things combine to build you up to who you are. And all of our encounters with other people are important, but sometimes we shut ourselves off from new connections because we don't want to see that disappear, which is really silly in the big picture. Some of the last fears, the fear of failure. The fear of failure holds people back from starting new projects, doing something that they know would actually benefit them in their lives. And believe me, I know, because I've done it a million times. I should have just taken initiative and done something, but I didn't because I had a fear, subconscious fear perhaps, of just never doing it or completing it, which sometimes is true. But that comes to the other fear, which is if we do complete it or we do fail it, there will be ridicule or embarrassment. Now that's one I let go of a long time ago. I'm not afraid of being embarrassed. I wear the weirdest clothes. I just, I don't mind being confronted. I know who I am and I don't care. If other people have an opinion, then that's fine. I respect other people's opinions. But about me, it's really irrelevant because I live my life and they live their life. And learned long ago that pointing the finger at other people for who they are just doesn't serve any real purpose. It just comes down to what works for you and do you mingle with the people that you encounter in your daily life. And you can't force it. So the last, I guess being judged for your accomplishments is one of the biggest fears people have. And doing the wrong thing, making the wrong move. But often that makes people stagnate. And we freeze. The old fight, flight, or freeze, we're so stressed out we don't do anything. You just have to take some approach and do something. Fear often comes when we're sitting around thinking about things that we could fear, right? Today I know people will say, well, if you don't want to fear, don't turn on the media. That's not necessarily true because fear comes from all directions. There's always something. There's some people who are just scared of everything. And there's others that are totally fearless. And I think it's good to be somewhere in the middle. I think, as I mentioned hell earlier, it's kind of funny. Religion kind of created this idea of eternal fear through this idea of eternal suffering, which is why I brought it up. Because religion always promised this suffering if you did wrong, but then science came along and wanted to work with religion to explain things. Science promised answers, and the difference between science and religion is that religion is stagnant. It remains the way it was 1,000 years ago, whereas science is always moving. Often people complain about science, say, well, why did the science change on this? It's like, well, that's what science is. Fuck, Jesus Christ, it's the simplest, obvious answer. Science changes when the information comes. But people don't realize that. And the thing is, religion and science are basically attempts to understand the world around us and life. And they are both co-opted and stolen in order to prove a certain point or have control or influence over a population. So both religion and science have been co-opted and utilized to create fear in many different ways, which I think is just a travesty, because it should never be about fear. Like, the most basic primal fears we have are bad enough already, without throwing on top of it that, oh, these are the sins you shouldn't do, and oh, by the way, don't eat these foods, science says it's bad, and then the next week it's like, well, a certain amount of these are good, and well, just a cup of wine. And really, we don't trust ourselves enough. And the fear comes from not knowing, but sometimes we just don't use our common sense. And now science is stagnant too. You see what I mean? Since it's co-opted, it's become like a religion. It becomes stagnant too. That's why a lot of this fear comes from the unknown, or the realization that nobody really knows what the hell's going on out there. We have experts in every field, but they can't seem to get along and put their information together in a coherent structure. And that's unfortunate. But the thing is, if religion lies, that's what we call caveat emptor, or buyer beware. If you choose to believe somebody and what they're claiming without evidence, and you want to use faith as your belief, that's fine. But that's buyer beware. If you get let down, that's your own fault. When it comes to science, these are things where folks say, well, these are consistently provable, repeatable results. that have a double-blind placebo-controlled study where we can see exactly what happened, but they don't anymore, and it's weird. So I bring that up because fear can become anger. And anger often is derived from the fact that people just don't have clear, concise answers that are fair and truthful. Even in the sense that science gets attacked, for example, because of people's fear of being ostracized. And we get into this completely different world of victim shaming and victim baiting and rage culture and rage bait, social media posts and fake articles, and a whole list of bullshit that causes more stress to people, and that stress manifests itself as fear. And we have a society of fucking neurotics right now because everybody's looking at Instagram and Facebook too much, or YouTube for that matter. I've always said it's not a matter of what social media you use, but rather what you look at. For example, I have Firefox on my browser so I don't get ads, right? So I can watch YouTube without getting ads. So I just get the content of the people who I watch. But with social media, you're being pumped ads constantly. I don't know if Instagram does advertisements. I'm sure they probably do by now. But I haven't used Facebook in a few years. And I feel like Facebook creates more fear out of nothing than any of the social media sites. The metaverse can take a big shit and stay out of my life. So at any rate, that's all I gotta say. Don't fucking fear. Don't fear. It's very simple. Do not fear. There's nothing to fear except fear itself. It's a true statement and factual in every way. Because ultimately, no matter what happens to you, the worst that can happen is going to be torture and death and suffering. And if it happens, it happens. Whether you fear it or not, it'll happen. Fear doesn't change the outcome of something. Fear doesn't change how something unravels unless that fear gives you the adrenaline to run away from a situation in a short term and then get back to your normal life. That's why memories tend to forget bad things. We want them to. It's good because we need to get on with our lives. Peace and love. Talk to y'all next time. Go out and hug a tree, motherfuckers. Thanks for coming to Carbo's channel, yo. Yeah.